Welcome to this edition of Lomrand Living. Today is July 4th, 4th of July, 2020. And we have a very special guest here this morning. Her name is Elodie Smith. Hi, Elodie.
Hi,
How are you doing?
good. I'm good. It's early. I'm good.
I know. Have you had coffee yet?
I don't drink coffee.
Oh, well, that's your first
I
mistake.
know. I know.
Come on now.
I'm on a natural high until I take a nap later.
All right. Well, you keep that adrenaline going, however you do it. So, Elodie, thank you so much for taking some time to have an interview with me today. The reason that I reached out to you is because this has been a very uh, turbulent time, not only nationally but also locally around race and relations and just sort of social justice issues. And I stumbled across your name as the chair of the DEI club at Campo, the parent club. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Somewhat.
Well,
Yeah.
so I'm going to ask you a little bit about that role. But before I do, let me just ask you about you. Like, how'd you get to La Miranda? When'd you come? Where do you live? All that jazz. Give us a
Oh,
little
okay.
bio.
So we actually moved in here the Sunday before Thanksgiving, and a job opportunity brought us down to this area from Beaverton, Oregon, where we had lived for a little bit of over 5 years, where a job opportunity brought us there from Atlanta.
Okay.
So we haven't been here very long, about 6 or 7 months or so. And we were attracted by, we love suburban life. And we knew that San Francisco was not the place for us to live with our 3 kids. We have way too many people in our family to be able to keep our quality of life. And so we were attracted by the schools and actually the physical environment as well, because it reminds us a lot of Oregon, and our kids were essentially raised there.
Okay.
And we love like the trees and the mountains and the parks and small town life.
So you are Moragan. You live in Moraga.
Yes, 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 I do. I do.
Okay. I
I
didn't mean to throw
do.
you with that descriptor.
No, I'm like, well, sort of. Yeah, no, I live in Moraga. I have a Moraga address.
Okay. And how old are your kiddos?
I have a 6-year-old daughter who's going into first grade, an 8-year-old son who's going into third grade, a 15-year-old son who's going into his sophomore year at Campo,
Okay.
and I have almost 21-year-old stepson in college in Kentucky.
Oh, all right.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to get to the point in a minute, but you say were originally from Atlanta, or is that
Uh,
just where you were for a while?
that's where so I'm originally a little bit from everywhere, but my husband and I are Southerners. He's originally from Mississippi,
Okay.
and my mom's family lives in South Carolina, Georgia, but we moved to the West Coast from Atlanta.
Okay. So I'm from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. That's why when you said Atlanta, I
I
thought, oh,
I went, I went to school there.
you went to UNC.
I did. I did.
You're a Tar Heel.
I am a Tar Heel. That's right.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, Elodie, give us the skinny. We need to hear a little bit about what's going on from your point of view as the chairman of, or the chair of the DEI committee at Campo High School. First of all, what does DEI stand for, and what is that? What does your club do?
So this committee, or now it's really a group, and there's a subcommittee within it. But this group is primarily all about promoting diversity, inclusion in our community with regards to academics, athletics, how our students are embracing or engaging in diversity and inclusion. This committee started, the idea about it started in the fall, where there was a parents club meeting and the topic came up. There was a subsequent meeting afterwards, and there were about 25 or 30 parents that were interested in just bringing more diversity and inclusion to Camp Lindo. And I got involved. I actually was not present for either of those meetings, but through reading the newsletters that were coming out, I saw something that said, "Do you want to be a part of this?" I said yes. Then they were looking for a chair. I expressed some interest. It took a while for me to express some interest because I wanted to make sure I had the time to devote to it. Um, and I clearly underestimated the time I needed to devote to it. And I accepted the role in early May
Okay.
to be the chair of this committee. And it had not formed really at that point. And so my action items were to take the summer and really form it out and build it the way that I wanted to. And then my plan got wrecked essentially, and I had to fast forward.
You had to fast forward, you say?
Yes,
Okay, well, take us to where you are today.
yes.
Fast forward us.
So fast forward. The past month has been insane with all of the national publicity and the media spotlights on uh, Black individuals who have been murdered because of injustices regarding race. George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, like all of those things kind of came to light. There was definitely an energy and a movement that started, which was very surprising to me in terms of how it started here in Moraga, a community where 0.96% of the population here in this town is comprised of African American, of the African American community. There was a rally. Hundreds of people came out from Moraga and the community just in support of like Black rights, Black Lives Matter, really wanting to be allies and accomplices and really kind of recognizing privilege and just realizing it's not enough to say I'm not a racist, but to really be anti-racist. And so now at this moment we have 160 plus members. I would say 130 of them came on board, if you will, within the first week. After, there was a powder keg of an incident that happened with a racist video that got put online. And then it was really just kind of the curtain being pulled in terms of the issue of race here in Moraga at Camp Belinda High School within our school district that people just really weren't addressing. What I was finding was that parents were having individual battles regarding situations that were happening that were racial incidents or discriminatory incidents with anti-Semitism that they really didn't feel like they had a voice or a leg to stand on. And so as heinous as that video was, it brought people together with a shared purpose and a realization that we really have to do more in our community and demand more from our academic institutions.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to go back for a second. When you came to La Marinda in the fall,
Mhm.
what was your expectation around these types of issues? Did you think you were coming into a environment that was going to be inclusive, supportive? Are you surprised by where you stand right now, or is this exactly what you expected, and this is and you are where you are?
It's really different because, we moved from Beaverton, Oregon, which is not highly diverse anyway.
Hmm.
And we lived there 5 years. We lived on a super diverse street where we had multiple ethnicities and people on our street of different backgrounds. And my kids felt safe. My oldest went to a high school that was 2,400 students or so. He was super comfortable.
Hmm.
His teachers kind of were involved in his life and kept me updated. And so our family is used to living and operating in white spaces, if you will. And our whole desire to come down here to California was primarily fueled with wanting to be in a more diverse environment. So our initial target was Oakland, but the school system there has a really bad reputation. And so I couldn't control that. And so we decided that we would move a little bit further out and we focus on the school's reputation. And that's kind of why we're living where we're living.
Hmm.
Now, I had anticipated that it would be similar to Beaverton, Oregon, but it's different. And I've felt the difference. Um, I mean, I felt it the first time I walked into the Moraga Safeway or the CVS, and I felt it when I was at my son's lacrosse games, and I wasn't sure, and I'm still not sure if it was because of racial issues underlying, or
Hmm.
if it's because we're new in town.
Uh-huh.
And people are very kind of tight knit, it's very cliquish here, but it's just different. And I have friends and colleagues that live here in the East Bay area. When I told them of where I was moving, there definitely were some comments,
Hmm.
and I anticipated a certain level of it, but to what not to what I'm hearing from all these parents and emails and former students and faculty members. Like, it
Hmm.
has just been overwhelming, the flood of information.
So what are you hearing? Just obviously you can't capture all of them, but generally speaking, now that you've been placed in this role where you're sort of an aggregator of a lot of stories and experiences and emotions, if you were to just sort of encapsulate it, what's sort of your takeaway of where we stand with race in Morocco or La Miranda?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a few different sides and complexities to this. So, when the video came out that got publicized, and the one that we're talking about, I also got links of Snapchats and postings of videos that were a little bit more recent than that one. Recent as in they were occurring that weekend. And it was just really appalling to me to see teenagers acting in this way. And I grew up in the South, like in South Carolina, and racism there is a little bit more up in your face versus here it's a little bit underlying, it's implicit. Um, and what I'm hearing from students and from parents that are talking to their students is that this is the norm. Like, they're not surprised. They don't expect any action about it because things have happened. I've read some student articles that have been written in the La Puma, which is the student paper on campus, where specific incidents have been called out, and the lack of response, or if there is a response, has just been very surprising and shocking.
Mm.
And when I start to dive into one of the things that we noticed when we first moved here, as we were looking at stats, were like test scores. And we always wondered why the test scores of African American students were so low compared to the test scores of their counterparts in other racial categories, to the point where even in special ed, the test scores are higher than African American students at some point. And we look back onto like previous years, and we're finding like that's a trend. The other piece that was surprising to me to hear were that a lot of this goes on, and some teachers just kind of let it go, or there's no like really dealing with the situation as they occur, or the parents feel that um, the administrations are favoring the offender versus the victims of certain scenarios.
Mhm. So
Um,
I'm gonna just stop you for a second. Um, when I mean we're talking generalities, and I don't at all want to call any individual out here, but when you're saying the things happen, everyone's going to go to, oh, someone's been called the N word. But what are the other things that are happening or that have happened that you think are going unaddressed by leadership or parents or this or our community that you think are also I don't know if you call them the microaggressions, or maybe they're more than microaggressions, but they're just not the top of the mountain as far as like the explicit word that we all know that we don't say.
Right. Well, I think it's a lot of students being able to speak out against injustices or inequities that are happening in school and feeling like they're getting ostracized by their peers for speaking out against it. So that would be, for example, that Jake hears his friend Zane say something that's inappropriate, a joke, if you will, and he knows that it's wrong, but he doesn't feel like he has the power to call Zane out because we haven't taught our kids how to do that. And we haven't really embraced that diversity and inclusion is actually a good thing. It's not a punishment. It's not a task. It's not a checkbox. It's the fabric in which our school culture should have wrapped around it, a sense of belonging. And there are things that needs to happen with regards to curriculum changes, trainings, workshops for kids. Just we need better acknowledge of it. There are the culture within athletics and in the locker room, and how coaches are not really calling out those inappropriate behaviors and making it a safe and fun environment for all. I like to go back to, the school does this challenge success survey, and the data there says that there is a large percentage of students that don't feel a sense of belonging at that school. I think it was 52% of white students and 47% of students of color have a sense of belonging. So if you flip that, you think there are hundreds of kids here that don't feel that. And then for me, like it's about starting to unpack and get to the root of why don't we feel this? Why aren't parents and students feel confident that when they report things to administrators that they're going to get dealt with? Why don't they feel the diversity within the school each and every day, not just during Black History Month? Like these are things that need to occur in a way that is, it's just not a one-off. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's a lot of the change that needs to happen at the school. Like and I've had some conversations with different officials over the past couple of weeks. And one of my things I think that I've been trying to stress to them is that the parents need transparency. If you're saying that you're doing this and you're saying that we're spending $160,000 to do this, we don't see the evidence, and there's no way of tracking or measuring that what you're doing is the right thing and that it's working. Mm-hmm. And so this group is primarily here to help to identify issues as they come up, whether it's racial, whether it's LGBTQ+, whether it's mental health. Like we're here to help identify and help implement things and to be supportive for the schools and for us as parents to really get the training to have conversations and to be able to lobby for changes in policy if that's needed. There are a few things that we're doing that the school has said, yes, we acknowledge like this should be in place, like a code of conduct for students, a code of conduct for athletes, because everything's so ambiguous that there's really no accountability for making sure that this school, this community is a safe place for our children, mm-hmm. and that they graduate wanting to they graduate being prepared to enter into a world that is diverse.
Yeah. When you mentioned the data that only 52% or around, about 50% mm-hmm. of folks, students at Campo feel that it's a safe environment. That's 50% that don't.
Yeah.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
And that goes beyond even this conversation, but it does go to the idea of inclusion and everybody feeling, a school is supposed to be safe.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it can be some people's only sanctuary.
Exactly.
So it does certainly show that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the high schools. But let me now ask you this. So, you as a grassroots group of parents are sort of have stood up to have a call to action, and you are obviously engaging with Campo leadership.
Mhm.
What is your ask of them, and how are you being received by them? You've sort of touched on it.
Yeah, so we had a town hall meeting in the middle of June where we kind of listed kind of all of the objectives and demands, if you will, that we needed from the school and from our district. And out of that, we came up with three things that we want to deal with right off the bat because you can't tackle that full list all at once or you'll get nothing done. So we'll take it step by step. But our top three things were a change to the mission statement for the school and for the district because your mission statement should drive like how like in a corporate sense it drives how my company operates, and everything that we do should be tied back to the mission statement. And if you have a mission statement and no one knows what it is and they're not abiding by it, then why, what are you doing? So we asked for a change, and that change is happening because right now it doesn't acknowledge diversity and inclusion. And when I researched other schools that have similar profile to ours, public and private, almost all of them address diversity and inclusion and equity in some form in their mission statement. And so we should be able to do the same because that's going to be our driver and our springboard for all of the activities that we'll do and all of the engagement and embedding that will happen. The second thing was we feel really strongly that we need a leader, a diversity and inclusion director of sorts to really guide this process and come up with a multi-year strategic plan for how we start making these changes at Camp Lindo. This piece has been, I think this will be kind of where it will not be as easy as changing the mission statement because while the administration acknowledges that there is a lot of significant work to be done and that we've been working on this for the past 4 or 5 years and enough hasn't been done, and we're finding that the battle there is convincing them that we need a full-time person that's going to focus on this and hold the school accountable. Right now, there are measurements. Right now, there are methods that are being done, and there's no accountability for it. Like, the data is just not existent, or it's just bad data,
Hmm.
and it's not transparent.
What's
So,
an example of that?
of what?
Of an effort, that initiative that's out there, but you have no idea whether or not it's just, you know, um, it's effective, or just that it's moving the needle in any way.
Right. So the district, I had a conversation this week and learned that the district have been trying to implement restorative justice within the school. And they're trying to get teachers trained for restorative justice practices rather than just simply handing out expulsions and suspensions for things that are happening. And where I thought that was interesting was, no, tell me about it. Because I guarantee you, most of our parents don't know this. For
Hmm.
me, restorative justice is a new idea to me. Educate me on it. Tell me
Right.
what you've been doing. Tell me how, as a parent, I can help support this, so that we can all be doing this together. And apparently, this rollout's been happening for a long time. We're still trying to get teachers trained up. Meanwhile, we're still having incidences that are racially or discriminatory in nature. And we've got this new kind of practice that hasn't been fully rolled out. Everyone's not trained on it, but yet we're still trying to do it. And restorative justice is something that's so important that you have to do it right. So what's happening in between is the question. Like, people are falling through the cracks. You've got students that are being laden with mental headspace of microaggressions. There's implicit biases everywhere. When we first started, everyone kept commenting to me about how great the basketball team was. And maybe my son would, like to link up with the basketball coach. And so I was like, My son doesn't like basketball. He plays lacrosse and he doesn't like hip hop. He likes pop music and video game music. So, like, these are examples of things like you've already categorized us. You
Mm.
don't even know us. And these are
They
the
didn't see your T-shirt.
right, right. But like those are examples of things that are constantly that need training on. The
Mhm,
teachers are getting trained through courageous conversations. They do a
mhm,
workshop. I've heard it's amazing. Not
mhm.
all of the teachers have gone through it. Not all of
Right.
the district officials have gone through it. It's like we need more visibility into what's
Mm,
happening
mm.
um, and how they're embedding this into our culture.
Elodie, share with me and everybody else what restorative justice means.
Oh, see,
Okay, as best you can.
as best as I can.
Yes,
So,
I know you're not the SME necessarily on it, but
yeah, I am not, and this is an area where when I talked to my parent ed group, I said we should do a session on this.
mhm,
I want to learn more about
yeah.
it because to me, it is something happens, and you get the offender and the victim to kind of come together in a shared space of some sort to kind of talk through it to rebuild the relationship that's there. It's not about like disciplinary actions, so to speak. And to me, in kind of my really basic knowledge of it, like I have issues with that, like for supporting it. Because as I'm starting to read more about it, I have concerns about how the victim feels about coming
Mm,
to confront the offender and to kind of work through that. So I acknowledge like I need more knowledge on it. I'm sure our parents need more knowledge on it. Our parents are definitely on a zero tolerance policy. Um, and from what I understand, Ed Code makes that difficult. We want to know more about like how Ed Code is affecting the disciplinary consequences for hate speech and
what's
symbol
EDCO?
Ed Code, the educational code,
Okay.
and how hate speech, legally defined, works within that space as well. Because from what I understand, like there are measures that are happening, disciplinary actions that are taking place, but districts are getting sued by parents of the offenders
Mm,
because their students' rights are being violated when someone gets kicked off of a team or gets removed from a student leadership position. And meanwhile, you've got the person who was mentally afflicted in most cases or physically. I've heard instances of hazing that's happened,
mm.
um, that are kind of just left with, whatever. So I I see a case for both.
Yeah. So what you're saying is making me think about how important it is for these DEI committees to exist at the elementary school level.
Yes.
Because that is where you don't want to get a child to the high school level where they've got this sense of autonomy and agency without already having their framework set in a way that they don't need to be on hair trigger alert and being vigilant about what not to do because they don't even think to do it. And my understanding is that there are a lot of DEI committees happening at the elementary school level, Marinda. My question to you is, are you connecting with all these different groups? Is there any sort of loose coalition? Are you comparing notes? And at some level, is there a plan of continuity that makes your job at the high school level a lot less difficult because the hard work is done before you get into the current, so to speak, into the breaking waves.
Right. That is interesting because there are a ton of groups that are out there. I've mainly heard from community based groups, DEI groups, in terms of wanting to be supportive of our parent group. We've got a relationship starting with St. Mary's College there. them wanting to be supportive. I've not really heard from the elementary groups. I actually take that back. I heard from my kids' elementary DEI group this week because my son actually knows one of the parents and they reached out to me and wanted me to get involved. But from my understanding, um, and this is not my words, audience out there, this is what I'm hearing,
Sure.
is that things get started and then they fall off.
Uh-huh.
And there's no true follow up. They kind of exist in name only.
Okay.
And so,
Well, hopefully this podcast will help with that because
yes,
we will put this out there and then people can reach out to you because there is, I think, like you said, there's certainly a lot happening now in this moment, for whatever reason that maybe it didn't exist before, despite the problems existing before. There is a momentum right now that people are being activated, and it's a
no,
great time to connect.
absolutely. I see that happening across the board. I mean, Miramonte didn't have a group. Now I'm working to help get their group started. Los Loma LL doesn't have a group, and I'm working with them to help them get started. So from the high school level, the four leaders of each school site, in terms of their DEI groups, like we will get together to kind of strategize from our individual standpoints and where we can collaborate. I'm not sure if the elementary schools are doing that as well, but that was one of the first things when we met as a steering committee that we said, like, it has to start earlier. I'm hearing that the real education starts at the middle school, which is
Hmm.
super unfortunate, where you've got students of color who've had such an experience at the middle school that they're not going to Camp Lindo or Miramonte, like they're going to private schools,
Mm.
and their parents are moving out, and that's really unfortunate.
Hmm. Hmm. So let's go back to leadership. You've been engaging the Campo uh, principal,
Hmm.
and I guess I don't know who else your group is particularly engaging, or maybe that's sort of your microcosm. But I know that in recent weeks, principals of all three high schools, Miramonte, Campo, and Acalanes, have all presented letters on their websites or done other things to show leadership during this time. Um, can you share with us a little bit about what you see? Is there been any leadership that you think has been really well done? Anybody who's really stepped up to the plate and sort of what they've done differently that sort of has resonated with you as a
Yeah.
stakeholder?
No, I really one of the people that really kind of stood out to me is Julie Parks, the principal over at Miramonte.
Okay.
Just in reading the communications that get forwarded to me, that she's sending out to her parent community, it's very kind of direct. It's bold. You know where she stands. The latest letter that I received, maybe about a week or so ago, she outlined a strategy, kind of what four pillars they were going to focus on: timeline, measures, like who the stakeholders were, acknowledging that it wasn't complete, but and it's not complete, it's not total, but here's where we're starting. More updates to come. So there are like regular updates there. On Juneteenth, she sent out that email, and then she aligned with the Black Student Union for a brief education on what Juneteenth was. And so you saw her giving a voice to a group that generally doesn't really have a large voice in that sort of context, the parent community. Um, and I know for certain that she is working hand in hand with their DEI group leaders as well to get their group formulated.
Okay. And is there any leadership no nos that you have seen that you would just like to say, this undermines what we are looking for?
I've seen, ambiguity is just not going to work in this particular instance when we're talking about diversity and inclusion and the equity measures that are lacking at the schools. So you don't want to be ambiguous. Um, our parents really are looking for really to know kind of where the leaders stand. Straddling the fence won't work trying to please the whole community. Um, I've referenced, Ben and Jerry's. You definitely know where they stand on the issue of racism and white supremacy. It's all there on their website. And I think that in these sort of situations, I have gravitated towards leaders who are vulnerable and show their vulnerability and that say, you know what, we've messed up. We haven't done it right. We need to get better. I need to get better. And we're going to fix this. It's not always going to be perfect. The road will be bumpy and difficult, but we're going to push through it because it's the right thing to do. And I think once you kind of open up your heart and your soul, you're giving back to those parents who feel like they've been ignored and not listened to and silenced for so long. They'll start to feel like, finally, I feel like something is going to happen. And being able to address the hard questions direct and head on versus kind of going around typical, going around the answers or beating behind the bush, like those things aren't going to work anymore.
Do you think that it is? I'm going back to the you said that it's 0.9% or something. You said in the beginning 0.9% of folks are Black in La Miranda. Is that the stat you said? Somewhere around there?
Moraga, yes,
Moraga.
0.96%. Mm-hmm.
Do you think it is hard to teach diversity when you don't have diversity?
It is. It is. And I think because people then don't see it. I've heard a lot of, I went to Campo and I never heard anyone say things like that. And I'm like, well, you're lucky. But things like this were happening and have been happening. And part of it is that we don't have a mix because there is a stigma about this community and about this school that kind of pushes people of color away. Even with the interdistrict transfer policy that got really strict last school year, that eliminated a lot of students that were coming up here from Oakland from being a part of our campus culture. So we've instituted certain measures that have allowed us to narrow ourselves even more in terms of the African American community. Now, there's diversity here in Moraga. Like we've got large Filipinos, Asians, Hispanics, mixed races. There's diversity, but the Black community is super small. And then things happen that aren't dealt with appropriately, and then we leave. I know of a student who had some issues occur. Their parents are going to continue to live here, but he's going to go to school somewhere else.
Interesting. When I started this podcast, part of the reason is that I love La Miranda, but I have to say this moment has both surprised me, but also inspired me. I love that you just had this huge wave of people who want to be part of this committee at DEI, the DEI committee at Campo. But I also would have absolutely said, oh, it's a very liberal, open community. But I called it a bubble myself. I've called it a bubble on the podcast. So it is so interesting to just be reflective on when you do, I guess, stand in a position of privilege that you have the luxury of being oblivious until somebody finally says, no, you can't.
Well, Jennifer, I thought the same thing until, during shelter in place, I've been on Nextdoor because I love the Nextdoor app. And I've had to really, well, I like the pettiness of it sometimes. Like I love the your dog was on my grass arguments, or your tree is over in my yard. And I do a lot of like the selling and free stuff. But like I've just seen a lot of ugliness on it within the past few months that I've just had to, it's hard for me to pick out the good. And And that's coming from our own community. And
Mhm.
that part is disheartening.
Yeah.
I go back to the Lafayette protest rally, the Moraga protest rally, the Orenda protest rally, and that gives me hope.
Yeah.
The work that the teachers are doing currently at Campbell, they're calling their own meetings, and they're really starting to dissect. I've been on a couple of email strings with the staff there, just watching the back and forth. So I feel like this time is the time for us to start to get it right.
Mhm.
That the curtain has been pulled, and now we all have to do the work. It's not just the school. It's not, I can't put it all on John Walker or Amy McNamara or John Nickerson or Bruce Burns. It's not just them. It's us as parents and it's us as a community. And so we all have to work on it, and we all have to hold our hands to the fire and be accountable for it all,
Yeah.
or else it doesn't work. And then our children continue to suffer. They continue to graduate and go into the workforce, and they've got all this, privilege, unacknowledged privilege or implicit biases, or they're inflicting these microaggressions, and these are the reasons why things are happening in the workplace or on the police forces or in government. Like, all of that is cyclical. And so we've got to start churning out students that are ready to take on the world,
Mhm.
and get better to it. Like, our corporations are demanding it. I mean, we are here with all of the tech companies, and almost every company here in the Bay Area, they have strong diversity and inclusion initiatives. And there's no reason why this town, this school district shouldn't have the same.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, Elodie, where do you work?
I work,
Changing subjects.
that's fine. That's fine. I work at Salesforce.
And what do you do there?
I plan, in a very simple term, I plan events and programs.
And the reason I'm asking is my last question to you about this topic is, what skills did you learn in the workforce that you are actually sort of imposing or deploying in this effort at the Moraga local level?
So, my company connects customers and companies together, and it's all about relationship building, in order to sell and keep clients, keep customers, retain old ones, get new ones. So the events that I'm a part of planning are basically, to me, they're human behavior experiments, and you want to create the best environment for each attendee that's going to meet all of their needs in terms of learning, engaging, being entertaining, having fun, being memorable. So that they continue to come back to this product, this company. They remain brand loyal throughout the good and the bad.
Mm.
Um, I'm used to organizing large groups of people. So in my past life, I've had teams of 38, 40 people underneath me globally. And so essentially, this is a project team similar to that. So we've broken out these 160 people. We've broken out into 10 subcommittees because I cannot do the work all on my own. This is one of the weaknesses I normally have on my performance reviews is I don't know how to delegate. And so I am delegating and allowing people to use their skill sets to be most effective to the work that we're doing. And it's
Mhm.
going off really well. I'm so surprised and I'm so happy.
So your initiative sounds like you're trying to change the Moraga brand.
Yes.
I'm so glad I asked that question.
Yeah. No, like, no, like, seriously, Jennifer, it is, this community has such, they're good people here.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to get overlooked. There are good people here. And I think at the core, everyone means well. But it shouldn't be at the disadvantage of others. So it can't mean well for just 70% of the
Mm.
people. It needs to mean well for 100% of the people that live here. And so for me, I see this as an opportunity to be a game changer. There's not we cannot find a public school district that has a diversity and inclusion officer. And I have a team that's looking for this. But what a way for us to really kind of get put on the map and set the trail, because at Salesforce, we're trailblazers.
Right.
So how awesome would it be to blaze this trail as this predominantly white community with these schools that are great at academics and athletics also be supreme at culture and diversity and inclusion? Like, we can have all three and set the precedent for other schools, because there are other schools and other districts that are in the same scenario that we're in.
Right, right. Wow, I love it. You're inspiring me.
Good.
Ah!
It's going to be a hard journey, and we just need to keep this energy while we're, as the news cycles are starting to change. And life is definitely going to become difficult as we try to figure out how the school year is going to start. Yeah. But we need to keep the same energy and movement, because there is a civil rights movement that's happening during this time. And our benefit here is how we educate our kids, because, it's really cheesy, but they are the future. And we just have to start doing better by them.
Yep. Great. So on that note, I'm going to pivot to the lightning round. Do you know what I mean? Okay. So I'm going to ask you a couple of really quick questions. I'm going to ask a question. You're going to give the answer. I'm not going to ask any follow-up. You're not going to give any follow-up. And that's that. You ready?
Okay.
You nervous?
I can do it.
You can do it. Take a deep breath. All right. What is one thing that you love about La Marinda?
The environment.
What is one thing that people would be surprised to know about you?
I love to go trap and skeet shooting on a sporting clays course.
I did not.
And I'm very good at it.
Who knew? What is one song that one of your kids likes that you secretly like as well?
It's Old Town Road.
Oh, I love that. And you know what? I can't tell you how many people have said that.
It's between that song and Into the Unknown from the Frozen 2 soundtrack. So it's those two.
Okay, good. And last but not least, who is one person that you know that you think I should know to interview for this podcast?
Just one.
Just one. You can give me a couple offline, but you can only say one online. I stumped you.
No, it's two people.
Do two. Go for it. Okay. I'm giving you two, only because I like you.
Patrick Turner, who is the counselor over at Camp Alindo High School. He is the only African-American faculty member there and has been for a few years.
Okay.
So he has interesting perspective. And Gary Hill, who's my co-chair. It's the first time I've ever called him that, but he's my co-chair. And he is a parent of a former student who is leaving. He's putting his kid in private school because of issues that he's had. And he's been in the community, I think, for about 13 years and is deeply embedded into it.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you for those leads.
You're welcome.
Let them know I'll call them.
Oh, they'll let me know when you call them.
Stop at the beachhead for me. So
I will. But good. Those are two, but I have a handful of people that I've met that have really interesting stories.
Well, I have reached out to Richard Whitmore recently, Bruce Burns recently, Heather Davis for school board issues. So there's so much percolating these days that require sort of just-in-time conversations. So hopefully there'll be a couple good ones coming up, but I'll definitely follow up with them.
Well, can I do a plug too?
Yeah, do it.
All right. So we have a website. It is a working website. And so we're going to build it up. Right now it's focused on racial issues, but of course we are expanding it because we don't want to be exclusive for an inclusive group. But I invite people to go to the website. It's www.d as in David, D as in diversity, N as in Nancy, I as in inclusion, campo.com. So that's DNICAMPO.com.
Okay. All right, good. And that will give everybody anything they need to know, especially about how to track you down if they've
How to
got
track
follow-up
me down,
questions.
how to donate if they want to donate to some of
Mm,
the workshops, because we are collecting funding to produce some really top scale events, and also we're still angling for that diversity and inclusion director role, and helping to
yeah,
potentially fund that. So
interesting. So maybe MEF could help with that.
yeah, we've had some conversations with MEF. We've had some conversations with the school and the district as well. One
Hmm.
of the other things we want to do in terms of trying to promote really a positive experience for incorporating DNI is like student and teacher grants for special projects that they'll be doing that we're encouraging students and teachers to do throughout the year. So being able to financially support those efforts as well.
Got it. Got it. All right, Elodie. Thank you so much. Happy 4th of July.
So,
And we will hopefully talk to you in the future. Please
all
reach
right.
out if you need to have the microphone for something else. I'm happy to facilitate another conversation.
I'm happy to do that. I apparently will be here for the next few months in my house.
Yes, yes. See. Oh, by the way, does your child go to Ream?
No, they go to LP.
Oh, LP. Okay, then I won't
Mhm.
see you around the block. But all right, take care.
All right, thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye.